Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen. We're here with another of our virtual events today. And today we have two terrific authors here. First of all, Cara Black has the paperback edition of 3 Hours in Paris has just come out. And it's striking design, kind of a different look from the hardcover too. Like it. And then our friend Rhys Bowen has a book coming out. I believe it's officially next week, right? We're going to be doing
week after.
Well, we're going to be doing a Zoom event coming up, and I'll put details in the comments field. And Rhys has already stepped in and signed a whole bunch of these copies. Those will be available very, very shortly. And as always, I'll be monitoring the Facebook comments for everybody who's watching this on Facebook. And I will come up about 40 minutes in or so and be happy to ask any of your questions. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Patrick. Merci. Et bienvenue, Cara. Un plaisir.
Merci. Well, I've got my cup of tea.
So I should really call your book 3 Heures à Paris instead of 3 Hours in Paris, but we may lose some of the audience. But anyway, congratulations on the publication of the paperback. It was your book was a tremendous hit when it published last year. It's had all sorts of great comparisons, great reviews. Comparisons to classics is really what I meant, like Hour of the Jackal. Wow. And Rhys is here to talk to you about that. Just to clarify, Rhys's book actually publishes on April 12th. No, 13th. April 13th. But we're lucky, we're going to have her book launch party on Saturday, April the 10th at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. For those of you who find Arizona time confusing, well, it is. But in any case, it is Pacific Daylight Time until the end of October. So please join us for that. Cara, do you want to begin by telling us some experiences that may have happened to you over the course of the last few months since your wonderful book came out?
Yes, well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Rhys. So my book came out last year in the pandemic, and I was really surprised that I thought nothing would happen, but we've been doing all these Zoom events, and it's been a real different experience. I mean, I miss not traveling, and Rhys and I, for many, many years, when our books came out together, usually in March, we would travel, we would book tour together, and get into trouble sometimes. But we had a lot of experiences. But so this year felt very different. I didn't go to an airport. I didn't have my, it was funny because before my book came out, I had my bag all packed, my roller, I was ready to put in the air, in the airplane, and it was like nothing. So it's been real different. But again, it's very cool because in a way I can watch someone doing a reading, at Poison Pen that I wouldn't have, I got to hear Ian Rankin at the Virginia Book Festival. Another place I was supposed to go, but so there's the pros and cons, and it is what it is, right?
Well, it is. When we spoke to you, when the hardcover came out, you were on your balcony, and we had a really spectacular view behind you looking out over San Francisco. So where are you at the moment? In your office?
I don't know. I'm in back in my kitchen. Oh. You can see the houses behind me. Same view. Right at my kitchen table, and Rhys has eaten here with John before, but yeah, we have a great view. The weather's gorgeous here. But I usually work in my office. It was just so hot today, I came downstairs so I could open the window. But yeah, I can't believe that it's a year later. The book is coming out, yet some, as they say in French, things change and they remain the same. Tout va bien, or plus ça change,
plus ça change, plus la même, right?
Yeah. Yes, it's it's interesting, and how publication has been. But I'm really thrilled with this. I'm thrilled with the paperback, and they have the wonderful map in it that shows all of Kate's destinations and in the book, and so I don't know. I'm a happy camper. What can I say?
Well, we're going to find out what Rhys is going to say, and then whatever questions she asks, I hope you will reply. So Rhys, I'm turning this over to you.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. You're going to stick around, I hope.
Oh, yeah.
And join in whenever you feel, whenever the mood takes you. Now, as Cara was saying, every year for many years, she and I would be on the road together when our books came out. As she said, having adventures. They were not always, the course of true love didn't always run smooth. We had some fabulous times. We had some interesting times. She nearly persuaded me to buy a white. She still talks about the white leather jacket that she tried to persuade me to buy. That was back in the days.
On Rodeo Drive, yes, on Rodeo Drive. And I will, I have the picture, so.
Yeah, back in the days when I wasn't earning the sort of money I'm earning now, and it was what, not 2,500 or something, like, no, it was a bit too tight. Anyway, it was a good excuse, but so there are good things that happen. We've had things that were not quite as good that happen sometimes, that, we were sitting after an event with one of the bookstall owners, and suddenly everything starts to shake and everybody says, oh, earthquake. And we're in this, like, it's an old converted cottage, and there's a big dresser full of cups and things right next to us, and they're all jangling up and down. And then the shaking stops and everybody goes, oh, earthquake. And like, oh yeah, okay. And then the next morning we're speaking, and we both gave sort of speeches at this big convention. And I'm at the podium and I'm speaking. There's this huge chandelier on the ceiling, and suddenly that goes rattle, 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 rattle. And people start walking out. And I think, do I stay like the boy on the burning deck and watch everybody else go until the chandelier drops on me, or do I run for my life? So we've had interesting things like that, haven't we, Cara?
We certainly have, and driving and getting lost before we had GPS, and, remember the place we stayed at in San Diego that you picked out?
Oh, yeah, I chose it blind because it was on the beach, and I thought we need a beach day, and it seemed quite nice. And it was dark. There was like mold. The coffee maker wouldn't. There was no hot water, was there? That's right. We were due to go to Warwick's bookstore, and we're going to have a shower, and there's no hot water, so we went.
Right.
Oh no, the hot water's turned off for the day. Like, we have to have a shower in 2 seconds, and it was awful. It was hot. We should have just left at that moment, but it was really horrible. Yeah. So yeah, we've lived a bit. So Cara, have you found?
I also.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, we also talk about books. We talk about plot and things as well when we were driving, when we're in a hotel room, and that's really fun because there's something about Rhys. I can just say, what do you think about this? Or this happened then, and she'll go, oh no, but you could do this, or
Well,
and that's so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, we live close enough most of the year, so we meet somewhere for lunch, and then Cara will say to me, so I'm thinking this character has got herself stuck in a room and she's suspended by her toes. Now, how do I get her out? That would be sort of a natural way to get her out. And I go, but it's very good to bounce plot ideas off someone else always, I think, because sometimes you can't really tell if it's too obvious, if it's not obvious enough, if the other person needs to know that, so just having someone to say, well, what do you think? Should I really do this? And you go, well, I don't think that works too well, or yeah, that's brilliant. So, I'm getting Italian. I'm using my hand a lot. I noticed this. I did an interview the other day, and when I saw that, I noticed my hands move all the time. So I'm hiding my hands from now on. So Cara,
and I remember, because it took me years to write this book, and I know over the years I would throw something out or say something about that, but it was always like your support, my editor's support, who said, you've got this, you've just got to figure it out, because it, but I found, since I had never written a thriller, now I'm doing this, that, it really helps to have a ticking clock. And I also know that you did, and I can't remember which story, you told me you printed the whole book out, and then you chopped it up with different points of view in your long hallway, and you would have this person did this at this time, and I did the same thing, because, okay, I used a lot of paper, but it really helped me see visually, well, there's
visually, that was the Tuscan child because I had two different stories and two different timelines going. So I put the chapters all the way down my hall, which is quite long. And then I decided, now when do we need to know this? And I just moved them all around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I saw that.
did you find the thriller was very different from writing Aimee? Because I mean, Aimee's in many ways, you've had many of hers that have been thriller-esque in that there's been a ticking clock, there's been something dangerous for her that she has to do. So did you find it was a big departure to do a standalone thriller or not?
No, not when I got the idea that there would be a 36-hour deadline. You know, the Fuhrer gives him this much.
Yes.
And then it became much more concrete. Whereas with Aimee, she's discovering things. It's true, she's kind of getting thriller-esque at the end, but she's discovering things. She has to run an office. She's got to take care of her child. So there's all those things pulling back. But with this woman, she is just, you know, she's running for her life.
Yeah.
And constantly, you know, I mean, there's Nazis involved, so there's not a lot of time to, you know, go have a coffee, even if you could, because it's not real coffee, it's Ersatz's coffee during the occupation.
Chicory, chicory, yeah. So I mean, some people haven't heard about the book yet. I mean, there may be some in the universe, you know, someone in the middle of Tonga saying, no, I don't think I know this book. So do you want to just give a brief overview or just a teaser about what the plot is? Because I think it's brilliant.
Thank you. Well, in June 1940, Paris fell to the Germans and they occupied it, and Hitler came to visit, okay? He, for 3 hours, 1, 2, 3, okay? He left and he never returned. Now at that time, you know, newly occupied, why didn't Hitler at least have like a parade or something down the Champs-Élysées? Nothing. And so I later found out when he had come to Paris, here's my show and tell, okay? There's Hitler in Paris with Albert Speer and Arno Breker, okay? His architect and his artist. And the two men wrote after the war, they survived, they wrote their stories, and Breker said, well, we were there on June 23rd, which made sense because it was right after the signing of the armistice. And Albert Speer said it was a week later, the 28th. And they never changed that. And I found this in this postscript and I went, that doesn't make sense. Why would he only stay 3 hours? Why did these two men who were both with him say different times? And I went, what if something happened? And I wanted to have a sniper who possibly could have taken a shot at the Fuhrer, who knew, right? The French are volatile then and they're volatile now, right? So who knew? You could have had someone who wanted to off the Fuhrer. And what if this woman was recruited by the SIS, the British Secret Service, and she was an American and she was sent. And there may be another reason why she was sent as well. So I really wanted to play with that. And I wanted to have it, this time I wanted to have an American woman, Kate Rhys, who is a big boned woman from rural Oregon and who grew up learning to shoot, and have her step into Paris. And that's sort of where the story came from and what happens. Spoiler alert, we know the Fuhrer lives. But what if something else happened? So that's, I hope that's brief enough, but
don't give any
she
more.
has her nemesis. Yeah, okay, her nemesis is a German former homicide inspector who is very good at his job, but has to work for the Fuhrer's detail. So I also wanted to write a German person who shows the sort of complexity of what it was like during the war on both sides. And I have to say, Philip Kerr, Barbara knows Philip Kerr. Many people love Philip Kerr. I loved his Bernie Gunther books, and I think my homage was to sort of name the German detective, Gunther. So I wanted to write about this time, and I think, Rhys, writing about the past and the war, it's not black and white, even though at that time World War II was the good guys and the bad guys. Well, there were a lot of gray areas. Yeah. And people did things because they were compromised, whether, for whatever reason, they were hungry, they had to protect their children. So how do you work with that?
Yeah, I think I think that's why we both are very much attracted to World War II, is there are so many character-driven stories as well as plot-driven stories. There are the people who are the true heroes, who literally put themselves out there because their country calls them. There are people more like Kate, who has an element of revenge in what she's doing because of the way she's been treated, and then there are people who see this as a great opportunity to make a few bucks, or a great opportunity to get back at someone. And, among the bomb victims, who's going to say if one lying dead there was actually killed or was killed by the bomb? So there's all sorts of interestingly complex stories that this is the Venice sketchbook is my 4th book now about World War II. And they're all so completely different that it's interesting to look at them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many dimensions, depends what you were doing. And I think it's fascinating.
Did you find
There's so much to learn.
Did you find it easy to get into Kate's persona?
At first, I felt guilty. I felt that I was, betraying Aimé Leduc. Okay, I felt like I was having an affair. I've been living with this woman for 19 books. But, and I talked with Juliet, my editor, about this, and she was like, well, think about it another way, it's another way to explore. And it really was liberating because Kate, as I said, is not a typical petite Parisienne, no style points for her. She would stick out on a Parisian street, and she would make mistakes. She would be very American in her outlook, which is not always a bad thing. She would be more alert. She's more direct, as French people are a little more indirect. And she would also have a mission, and she would be very good at what she did. But what if she was set up for something? So kind of an American with this know-how and a resilience, and who literally is running for her life. So that was kind of liberating to give her, to have that other persona, and we both know you want to make it difficult for your protagonist. You want
to make them suffer.
Them up.
Yeah,
suffer.
Yeah.
Throw those rocks. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
enjoyed that.
There are very few books I read that I really would call page turners, and this was one of them. This is one where you daren't turn the page, but you have to turn the page, and you keep going till you've finished. And that doesn't happen to me very often. And this was one of them. And one of those books when I said afterwards to other people, hey, you have to read this. So, I think you did really well on it. And I think moving into the thriller world, which certainly isn't an easy thing to do, is something that you've accomplished now. So well done about that.
Thank you. Yeah.
What's the difference that you see between writing an Aimé Leduc, which is basically an investigation? She's a private eye, but it's always had thriller-esque elements, and writing a thriller. I mean, what are the distinctions that you're making between the Aimé Leducs in this particular book?
Well, I read a lot of thrillers, a lot of male thrillers, before, and because men always get to be the snipers or the saboteurs. And so, but there's a lot of character-driven thrillers. Mm-hmm. So that's what would really, and I won't say all the names, but we all have read them. And I thought, okay, so how does that work with a woman? And then I was thinking, well, with Aimé, we are always interested. I'm interested in her everyday life. She runs a detective agency. She's got to pay bills. She's got to pay Renee, her employee. She's got to pay the rent. She has a dog to take care of, and take it to the vet. Or, there's problems like with the man she's seeing or not. There's her godfather, Commissaire Morbier, who she's always trying to use as a way to find information in the police. So we've got this life she has, this apartment, this, people in her world. And I also like to be in her world and go shopping with her, down the street, window shopping with Aimé. And so that's part of the joy, I think, of writing these books. She is Parisian, half Parisian. So we get to see the fashion element. We get to see what a French woman would do who doesn't cook, Okay, so she's got to do special takeout from Fauchon, or so there's all these wonderful little things that Amy can do, that I would love to do, that I think in a thriller, Kate is not worried. Well, she does actually have a change of clothes, very quite nice clothes, but it's all in the purpose of disguise. So it's that Amy has a world that I like to go into. Does that make sense? You know, it's not.
Well, it does, but I don't think that's really where I was going, Cara. In an Amy the Duke, you have to find things out. It's an investigation. So it's a question of, there's a certain linear progression to it, in the sense that something happens, and Amy's job is to figure out why, what was the motive, you know, who are the people involved, and so forth. In a thriller, you know all that from the outset. A thriller is not about finding out stuff, it's about winning. And so, you know, it's a whole different feeling to it. And basically you've got an antagonist and a protagonist, and it's a question of who's going to win at the end. It's not a question of who done it. And so it's a very different strategy. I don't think that you know, how much character is in it, or whether they take time out to go shopping, which would slow down the, you know, the suspense, is really the point. The real point is that, you know, from the get-go, she's gone off to Paris after the terrible thing that's happened to her up in the Orkneys at Scapa, and she wants to kill Hitler. And we know, because he lived, that she missed, right? I mean, we all know that she didn't actually succeed in taking him out. So then the question is, how does she get away? You know, she's a lone British woman or American woman in Paris. And, you know, Rhys, you've read an awful lot about, and I have too, and I'm sure Cara has, about women who were sent into France behind the lines, English women and all. And their survival rate was always poor, and it was known from the outset. I mean, Jackie's new book, you know, one of Maisie Dobbs's problems is that she's screening those women, but she knows that most of them are not going to survive. I mean, there's no real plan to bring them back. And that's your problem in this book. You know, she goes over there and she's going, if she succeeds, great. If she doesn't,
she's expendable. You know, she's expendable.
Right, but she is expendable. And so the real thrust of your book is, how does she overcome being expendable? And the suspense comes from whether she will make it back to safety. It doesn't come from whether she will identify the assassin.
Yeah, I think, you know, in a thriller like that, it's not the who done it.
Right.
The thing in this book is, who can I trust? Because she finds throughout this that there are people she thinks she can trust and she couldn't, and vice versa, you know. So you never know from page to page. You're holding your breath with her, saying, is she making a mistake by changing these clothes? Is she making a mistake by picking up this bag? Everything that she does could be the end of her life. And that, you know, that's the suspense of the book.
Well, that's
you can only trust herself.
But her overall goal is to win by escaping. And you're right, that every single encounter she has could derail that. You know, I mean, at any moment she could be killed or imprisoned. And so you're right, it's a sequence of trust moments. But the overall goal is just to get out of France and get back to the relative safety of England. At least we're not. Are we in the Blitz? What year are we in here?
1940, 2 weeks into the German
occupation. So the heavy Blitz is over, but nonetheless, bombs are raining down on Britain all the way through the war.
There were bombs. There were bombs, and the Blitz sort of started later, August, September. But I did an event the other day, and it was so interesting. It was a French club in Minneapolis. And the woman said, you know, my great uncle, he was at Scapa Flow. He was actually a French prisoner of war in 1943 in Scapa Flow, which I don't, you know, I said, oh my God. She said, that's why I wanted to know if your details about Scapa Flow and the submarine that blew up and whatever, I can't say, but, and I said, yes, it all came from real history, you know, it was before the Blitz. And she said, I'm going to find out, my great uncle wrote a book, I'm going to, you know, make a copy and send it to you, because why would a French naval officer be a prisoner of war? But anyway, that'll be fascinating. But I used real details. I think it was funny. The last time I was actually in Paris, I went to the newly opened Resistance Museum that is now in where the catacombs are, where you used to enter the catacombs. Now that's across the street. And you go in, you go down, and the museum had literally opened for a few days. I went in there and I saw a newspaper because remember when the Germans marched in, everybody fled. They didn't print newspapers. There was so much so. And I found a newspaper that was printed right after June 23rd, 1940. And it was a one sheet, you know, because they didn't have a paper in both sides. And it was like talking about the Fuhrer, you know, having just signed the armistice. And I was like, yes, it's true. I'm with Arno Brecker's camp. This really happened. Hitler would have come here. And they were worried about Italy invading. You know, when you look at that time, it's so different.
Yeah.
And then I found these British newspapers that Britain was terrified that that Germans were going to invade from France, especially after, this is right after Dunkirk. And they had plans to do it. There was Operation Sea Lion. It didn't happen. And different historians have different theories about that as well.
Well, you know, vaguely, I mean, you know why it didn't happen, because Hitler suddenly turned on Russia. He suddenly set his sights on supposed ally Stalin and suddenly went east, and he withdrew people and went east. The stupid thing is that, you know, from all my research and what I know, if he had chosen to invade, there would have been no way Britain could have stopped him. Literally, there were, you know, the people were going to stand there in the fields with their pitchforks and against the tanks. It would have been, and, you know, the first book I wrote on this in Farley Field is about a group of aristocrats who actually were aiding Hitler to help him with the invasion. So, you know, it probably would have been very easy. So we were very much spared. And the bombing, Barbara, the main blitz started late that year. It started like November 1940.
Okay.
And all that winter was the terrible blitz. And then the next year he moved on to the historic cities bombing, you know, the reprisals bombing. Like every time a German city was bombed, he would go after Bath or Coventry or somewhere just as a reprisal.
Yeah.
So, but and then of course, after a couple of years, he switched to what they called the doodlebugs, which were the unmanned planes that he sent across, because obviously you don't lose any men when you send those over. And those were lethal. So, you know, that was in 1943, but bombing went on.
And then the V2,
The V2,
yeah, the V2 at the end of the war.
yeah. Well, luckily the war was coming to an end there, else that would have been even worse, because you didn't hear them until they actually struck, because they were supersonic. So.
Well, I brought it up just to say that, you know, the whole goal seems like, you know, if we could just get to England, we'll be safe. And it's true that there weren't Nazis who were going to frog march them down, you know, and execute them in the square. But England was never safe during the war, because, you know, you could always fall victim to, you know, something falling from the sky or whatever. So, I mean, we were safer here in America, which we would not be today. It wouldn't happen because of the long distance nature of missiles and drones and so forth. There's no one place that you can really go anymore and expect, you know, not to be struck. So
Yeah.
Cara, am I allowed to ask, you were talking about a follow-up to this. Have you pursued that at all? Or?
I have. I've sent it to my editor. I have no title. I just call it Kate 2. I don't know. It's later in the war. I don't know, you know, it'll be different, a different mission. She has a different mission. And there was one part where she was going to get in the plane that was landing in the forest, going to go to Prague. And all of a sudden it was like she gets in and they say, we're not going to Prague, we're going to Alexandria. So we go to Alexandria in Cairo in World War II, which is just fascinating. So, I don't know I can't tell you, but I don't know, maybe I saw the English Patient too many times, but I have been in Cairo, I have been in Alexandria, and I remember reading like Lawrence Durrell's The Alexandria Quartet, and I remember actually walking around the souk in Cairo, and I was just like, oh, I could just be here in World War II. So that might happen. But before that, there's a new Amy Leduc that comes out this time next year.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's called Murder at the Porte de Versailles.
All right. Yeah. We're running out of ports to have Amy set at, right?
Yeah, I know, port. Yeah, I had to really scratch around for that title. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you planning to go to Paris this year? Do you think it's safe to travel by the end of the year?
I'm vaccinated. When they open Charles de Gaulle, I'll be on the plane, but I don't think as an American I can go right now.
In fact, the French are quite overwhelmed. There was a very sad article that said they might have to start doing triage because they don't have enough hospital beds and nurses to care for people. So you certainly would not want to be planning to go at this time. I think that any of us planning on real travel this fall should be, to Europe anyway, should be extremely cautious.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I mean, when it's possible, I will go for sure, but
yeah.
I just don't know.
So
Actually, some of my friends had AstraZeneca, and isn't there some controversy about that anyway? But
well, there was a blood clotting thing, but there's more and more vaccines coming on the market, but there's also no real evidence yet about how long the vaccine will protect you or whether it will protect you from variants. So, we don't want to have a false sense of safety about this. Rhys, let's talk a little bit about your Venice book, because amazingly, we're still in World War II. I mean,
we are. Yeah.
It's like the gift that keeps giving to writers, although it certainly, there's so many reasons for that. It was so global. It was so immense, and yet it was so specific, so particular to stories. And what's interesting is that so many of the stories are about women, because forever, most of the stories about World War II after the war were more about men and fighting and, Alistair MacLean and the Guns of Navarone and all that sort of thing. But now we're finding all sorts of stories about quiet courage and people who try to keep things going and whatever. But anyway, your story starts before the war, although you like to jump back and forth in time. So tell us what happens.
Well, this is a story, it's a multi-generation. We start in 1928 when Juliet is a young girl taken to Venice by her very strict and prim aunt. And when she falls into a canal trying to rescue some kittens, she herself is rescued by a handsome Venetian. And
couldn't have been an ugly Venetian?
No, there were.
No, there's no ugly Venetians.
Yeah. And then we fast forward 10 years and by a quirk of fate, she's back in Venice and meets him again. And then she finds herself trapped in Venice for a life of forbidden love, of danger, all sorts of things throughout the war. So we see how Venice has handled the war, going from the beginnings when actually Venice was spared because both sides agreed not to bomb. And so Venice had really a charmed life for several years. There was enough food from the sea and from the Veneto, which is around it. So they were doing okay. And then things got worse. And then, of course, Italy changed sides. And so then the Germans came in and then things got really bad. So, Juliet has what made me, I think, start this story was my aunt, my prim and proper English aunt, used to spend every Easter in Venice. And being a sort of romantic teenager, I found myself wondering, why does she go to Venice every Easter? What if she has this secret love there that nobody knows about? And so that was that was years ago, that germ of that story. And so when I wanted to write about Venice because I love it so much, and it's just such a place. I mean, you can't go wrong with writing about it. It's one of those places there are millions of stories about. And it was interesting. Their treatment of the Jews was different from everybody else's. They're a very tolerant society. They've always had a huge ghetto. Well, the ghetto, actually, first ghetto was in Venice. That's the word actually meant iron foundry, which was where the Jews lived. And so, there's so many stories waiting to be told there. So I thought, what if this, then of course we have something in the present, as we always do in my books. What if this woman has had a whole secret life that nobody knew about? And she's dying when she's 90 years old, she's lying there, she's dying, and her great niece Caroline is sitting at her side, and she presses a box into Caroline's hands, and it contains three keys and a sketchbook of Venice. And so that's, that's all Caroline knows. And so she goes to Venice supposedly to just scatter her aunt's ashes, and then things go on from there. And gradually the keys unlock secrets of that whole life. So that's the sort of book I like to read. That's why I write them.
I think that's really fair. I'm always fascinated by the idea that people can really lead complete secret lives for decades, and and somehow that's okay. I mean, I don't know that I would be capable of doing that.
Well, we know, I mean, in Juliet's case, her family knows that she was what they think is trapped in Switzerland for the war, because that's what she lets them think.
Right.
At the end of the war, when she makes it to Switzerland, she does help with the repatriation of refugees and things. So they think that's what she's been doing all the time, and she never contradicts that. So nobody in her family ever knows what she did.
But I guess my question is why? Why would she? I don't want you to answer it because that's part of the book. But I do think it's fascinating to think that somebody could, in fact, keep that whole thing secret. And I wonder if it's because they just don't want to share it, if they, if it's sweeter to remember it, if it's so painful they don't want it to come out in the open. I mean, you'd have to have a really powerful reason for keeping yourself to yourself. Although that's kind of a British thing that Americans are not inculcated with, keeping yourself to yourself is like a virtue in England, whereas here everybody's going, what's wrong with you?
Well, especially if she signed the Official Secrets Act. I mean, there's many people, loose lip sync ships. I mean, I think people in that generation kept things quiet. They never talked about like their war service, or, I mean, I'm not saying she did war service, but they never talked about it because you sign the Official Secrets Act and that's it. It's a different generation. They're not on it. They're not Instagram types, right?
Well, and that was interesting with, in Farley Field, which is about Bletchley Park, those people in their Official Secrets Act, that act was not lifted until the mid-1990s.
Right.
That meant that there were parents who didn't know that their child had done something heroic. There were even husbands who didn't know their wives had done something heroic because they weren't allowed. When I saw the Bletchley Circle, which I thought was brilliant, by the way, I found myself thinking, could I have kept this from John? Could I have just not told him anything about it? I don't know if I could. I don't know if I'm that good. I might have given a little hint. Well, you just think I'm filing, but ...
Yeah. And the other thing about the Bletchley Circle, I agree. I thought it was terrific. Was it illustrated how hard it would have been to have led that sort of purposeful life during the war, and then not only could you not talk about it, but you were relegated to like hoovering your house or, any really meaningful work. In many cases was withheld because the men needed jobs and
came back and got the jobs. Yeah.
And so you would have had this double question of, not only could you not talk about it, but you couldn't really continue. Which is what happens in the Bletchley Circle is, they're looking for some purposeful activity to carry on. So I thought it was really well done. I mean, the world's quite different now at least for American women. And I think probably for British women, and it would, now they're serving on active duty now. All kinds of things are happening. Why don't we summon Patrick up in our sort of Shakespearean way here and see if he's going to emerge from the deep with any comments or questions.
I'm here. Yeah, I have some nice questions. Let's see. Kathy Ace, fellow writer, has a question.
Kathy?
Yeah. She has a question for you, Cara. And actually, this applies to both of you. Her question is, did you start with the idea of the period, do the research, and then find inspiration for the story? Or did you have the story and do research to fill in the gaps, get the details right? Which led first, research or story?
I think the story, but I think the last time I saw Kathy was in Bristol. at the Bristol Convention. So yeah, it started off with this question: why was Hitler in Paris only for 3 hours, and what did that mean? I read a book called The Rogue Male by Jeffrey Hausman, very famous one, where he goes to assassinate Hitler, but he doesn't. And I was like, well, there's a man for you. You have that opportunity at Berchtesgaden and you don't take it. So I also wanted to see women in a larger role, especially there were Russian snipers, a whole division of female snipers. One woman had 309 kills. She was a hero. She was brought to the United States, had a tour of the White House and met Eleanor Roosevelt. So I really wanted to get that kind of person and what that kind of person would do. And then when I started doing the research, how it could happen, I got great plot ideas. I went to the oh, Rhys, I don't know what it's called. It's in London, Churchill's War Rooms. You go downstairs.
The War Rooms, yeah, in Whitehall, yes.
And it was like amazing. They ran World War II from there, these strategy rooms with the maps and how small and claustrophobic it felt. And so I got to use all that in the story because it really fleshed it out. So I don't know if I'm answering you, Kathy, but it kind of came from the idea, and then I would go do research also in Paris, and then this incredible, the war rooms in London, and reading about the newly declassified papers about Section D. It just really sparked more of the story.
Let's see, Vicky asks, Cara, have you thought about writing another book that takes place in Aimee, how do you say the name? Aimee's past?
Her past. That's a great idea. I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about her grandfather, Claude Leduc, who I wrote about in Murder on the Quay. And we meet Claude, and he's her grandfather, and he's a gourmet cook. He goes to the auctions at Drouot. He has his mistress is this incredible woman. And he's always telling Aimee, just follow your heart, you don't have to worry about med school, follow your heart. So I sort of fell in love with Claude, as some people did. And I was like, I would like to write about Claude and maybe Aimee. So thank you for the question, but I'm certainly thinking about it. He's a bon vivant, I would like to, I wish my grandfather was like him.
Here's a question from Judy, who asks, both Aimee Leduc and Kate Rhys are strong-willed women. Any chance you will eventually have a strong-willed male main counterpart to counterbalance Aimee and Kate?
Well, we might. It's a mystery. But think about Philippe in this story, the Frenchman. When I wrote Philippe, I didn't know if Philippe was the positive or the negative charge in the story. And I won't reveal what happened, but I think I have to sort of feel that character is going to come out. I love strong women too. I like to write about strong women. I hope the men I write are foils. And don't you think, Rhys, we want to kind of balance it, but it's also partly a woman's story.
Yeah, and if you've got a heroine, you don't want that sort of cliche of having to be saved by the man at the right time. You want the woman to be her own, you want her to form her own destiny, really, without the judgment of a man or without the guidance of a man. So there are so many books in which the man has been the hero for years and years and years. It's nice. I'm glad we're finally, thanks to Sue Grafton, Kinsey Malone, we've got women who can forge their own way, which I really like.
Exactly. I remember reading Kinsey Malone and my eyes went like, boing.
Yeah.
How cool is she? Such an independent woman, and I was like, oh, I those opened my eyes. And Marcia Muller's books too.
Yeah.
Really,
Now that we know that so many women took these incredible risks during the war, they were not the heroes who flew the bombing missions, at least not for us. If you've got Kate Quinn's The Huntress, that the Russian women were fantastic at that. But as Barbara said, to go into Paris or to be dropped into France and know that your chances of survival are very slim. To get on your bicycle with the radio in your little pannier at the front and to know you could be stopped by the Germans at any moment and have to flirt your way out of it. I mean, those are the real heroes, because you're flirting with danger every single day.
Right. Those are the unsung heroes, the ones people don't talk about.
Yeah.
But those stories are coming out, hopefully. I met this resistance woman who was in her 90s, gorgeous skin. And she had in her pannier, she had her toddler on her back, the pannier with a package that her father had given her to bring to the Maquis outside of Lyon. And then she put her eggs on top of it. She never asked her father what was in it. She went through, there was a checkpoint, and she went through the checkpoint, and then she took this to the Maquisard, and they took out the bag, and it was full of guns. I said, your father gave you a bag of guns, and you had your toddler on your back? And she goes, yes.
Yeah.
And I go, well, weren't you scared? Weren't you? She said, you know what? Did I have time to be scared? Who's going to suspect me with my baby on my back with a bunch of bags?
Yeah.
And that's how women did it. They used what they had. I'm sure she was scared later, but she was just like, there was so much going on. We did what we had to do. Really.
Well, you think about, in London when you're being bombed. I'm writing a book right now in which someone gets buried in the rubble in London. Almost every night you get the bomb thing. You had to rush down to the bomb shelter or the cellar, and you didn't know if your house was going to be standing when you came out again. That became normal. It was funny because this same aunt of mine, the one who was the inspiration for the Venice sketchbook, she had a very senior role in the Admiralty in the British Navy during the war. And when the Americans finally came in, they'd be in her office, and the air raid warning would sound. And they'd grab their tin hats and be about to run down, and she'd be sitting there at her desk, and they go, "Didn't you hear that was the air?" She'd go, "Yeah, we got 700 hits yet." And they couldn't believe it, but you get so used to things that you calculate your risk.
And she was taking care of business, so
Well, she was another one who the war couldn't handle.
You're writing another. Yeah. You're writing another World War II book?
I am. I can't stop.
Okay. Now we know.
It's very different though. It's about someone who is bombed, who's evacuated, and the story has all to do with a bomber command base, and the men who fly out every night, never knowing if they're going to come back next morning. So that's mainly what the story's about. Obviously, it's a lot more than that, but.
When you come back to San Francisco and we can have our socially distanced coffee, let's meet.
We can even actually get together for dinner. We can sit in the same room. Has June had his shots?
Yes, he has. So yes, we can. You can come eat at the table.
Yeah, we can eat. Good.
I just have a comment here from the wonderfully named Aspasia Ka, who's, I think I got that right. She says, Ms. Bowen may enjoy Kate Quinn's new novel, The Rose Code, if you haven't read that, which follows 3 young women who worked at England's Bletchley Park.
Yeah.
Have you read that yet?
No, it's on my list to read though, so it's my upcoming list. No, I like Kate's novels very much.
On my list too.
Yeah, let's see. There was a question back here somewhere for you, Rhys, which was the person was just asking, you've written numerous different series. Is there one in particular that is nearest and dearest to your heart? I'm paraphrasing, but.
That people always ask that, and it's like saying, now, which of your children do you actually like the best? I've found over the years, when I was doing one Molly Murphy book and one Royal Spinist book, I found it was always the one I wasn't doing right now. And I'm in the middle of work about one. I think, I can't wait to get to another Molly book, or I can't wait to get to another Georgie book. There's something about both of them, I think, that is an element of me, a different element of me, but, so it's close enough that when I'm writing them, I'm channeling them quite a lot. So the Royal Spinist books are just pure fun to write. I can't wait to see what Queenie the maid's going to do next, and I can't wait to see what drama Mummy's going to have, or so those are characters, or what Mrs. Simpson's going to do. So those are characters I really enjoy, but it's good too to do the standalones. I really like to do a standalone novel, to come to the end of it, and then, okay, I've seen this little chapter of these people's lives, now I'm going to walk away from it. And then every single book I get of these, are you going to do a sequel to this? Like, no, it's done, it's over. I like to leave them in a place that's a good place for them. There was only one I left open at the end, and that was in Farley Field. And one day I may do something else on that, because it does have the whole sort of spying Bletchley Park secret agent type thing to it, which would be kind of interesting to go back to.
Is there one of your characters that you identify personally with more than others?
I suppose Molly Murphy was the closest, because when I wrote about her, I wanted to write about a woman who had a strong sense of justice, who wasn't always wise about when to shut up, and didn't always know when to stop, and sometimes got into trouble because she spoke up when she shouldn't have done, which has been very much like me most of my life. But so yeah, I think. But Molly's much braver than I would have been. I've never climbed over walls after people, or gone into a place that's full of gang members and pretended to be someone else. I haven't done those, but Molly's a bit gutsier than I am.
Let's see. Here's a question for both of you. What books are both authors currently reading?
I'm reading Jacqueline Winspear's latest. I have it right behind the computer. I'm going to interview her next week. But another Maisie Dobbs about about SOE, and yeah. So I'm reading that. I am also reading. I just finished Alma Katsu's The Red Widow. I believe that's very much a page turner.
Yeah.
I'm
finally getting to Louise. I gave everybody a copy of Louise Penny's All the Devils Are Here for Christmas, and so I'm finally getting to read my own copy of it, because the trouble is that when you get known for a certain type of book, every publisher in the world sends you their books for you to read and quote on, so I seem to spend most of my life reading a book that I wouldn't have chosen to read otherwise, because our publishers asked me to, and some of those are really wonderful, and some of those are just they're okay, but I wouldn't have chosen to read them. So that's a great way of discovering new authors, though, and discovering maybe new authors that are coming out that I wouldn't have read otherwise.
This is pretty interesting. Kathy Ace again has a comment. She says, "Oh, Rhys, I used to stay in an old country house in Kent where the bar in the basement had the signatures of the pilots who were flying out the next day written on the oak ceiling beams with their ages listed." She says they were all heartbreakingly young.
Yeah. I bet that, interestingly, that must have been Biggin Hill, which was the Spitfire base. And that was right next to my school. And I was at school there in the late 50s. And we used to love it because by then they had the Hawker Hunters, which were fighter jets. They were incredibly loud. And every time they took off, you couldn't have, none of the teachers could talk for at least 15 minutes. So we used to like that.
Let's see. Annette just came in with a question. She says, have either of you read Lisa Scottolini's new historical book, Eternal?
No, that's also on my list to read, yeah.
We just did an event with her last week or so ago.
Yeah, that's a big departure for her. Have you read it, Barbara?
I have. We actually launched it last Saturday. We had a wonderful conversation. Hank turned out to be a special guest. So it became very emotional, which was absolutely great. Loads of enthusiasm. Eternal it's a love story. It's a coming of age story, a triangle, so to speak. But it's also about World War II, and it's set in Rome, and the reverberations in the Jewish community in Rome were terrible, like everywhere else. So, but Lisa reminds us in the book about everyday life, that people had to continue to, to shop and to cook and do laundry and whatever. That the huge picture of the war, there was still everyday life that you had to survive. And so it actually isn't that different, because she's always had so much backstory in all of her books that that it doesn't, I don't think it's all in the past, but that's really, to me, the only big difference.
Mhm. I mean, that was one of the things in the Venice sketchbook that comes up, is how do you survive from day to day? Because my heroine is there illegally. She's a British alien and she's in Venice. She doesn't have, well, she's given a ration card from a dead woman, but then one day somebody's going to query her identity card and her ration card because it's not really her. And then if she doesn't, then they confiscate it. And then what happens? Where do you get food from? So all of these things are a matter of daily survival. And also other people know that you're not Venetian. So is someone going to turn you in every day? So you live with that tension pretty much every day. And just when you think you're safe, then you're not.
Yeah, that's the same with Kate. Will her paper stand up to scrutiny? And given that she's very distinctive, I was like, how are you going to put this woman on the street? So she gets some lessons from Shakespearean actors who talk to her about how do you change your look very quickly. It's nothing very theatrical. You put a pebble in your shoe. You walk a little differently, because the walk is how you pick people out.
Yeah.
You bend down a little bit. You take your scarf off. You put it like this. You take some charcoal, little things you can carry and put it around and make yourself look old. Because as someone says, you know what? When you're old, you're invisible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times a woman can do something and very quick and turn her jacket inside out or something, which you have to think quick. Something sewn into the sleeve that you could use, for metro tickets or something. So you could be caught out at any minute.
Yeah.
You could. Well, we've all just experienced not feeling safe for a prolonged period of time. So not wartime, but an invisible enemy. And we can see the effect that it's had on all of us, and I mean, it's eroded a lot of norms that used to prevail and left everybody anxious and threatened and isolated. So, it's really been a bit like going through a war. So on that cheery note, I think we need to wrap this up. I want to say thank you very much for a chance to see you, Cara. And it's always a treat to see Rhys. And now that she's here in Scottsdale for at least a while, we get to see each other more often, shortly for lunch, as far as I can tell. But anyway, we'll look forward to seeing you with MA next spring. But, in the meantime, if it moves you to participate in something, let me know, because we're always happy to. And I want to comment on your glasses. They are really fabulous.
Thank you. Brand new, the readers. Yes.
I do one more quick question, since a number of people have asked this, Rhys.
Oh, okay.
When's the next Molly Murphy book coming?
Well, tell everybody to stay tuned, because I may have a really nice announcement very soon. I'm not at liberty to divulge at this moment, but things are looking quite good in that direction.
Good, good.
I think you and the other Molly fans can be
Right.
pleased maybe next year.
Excellent.
Okay.
I know, but I
really like that. Now, so anyway, Patrick, thank you once again for hosting, and I'll see you in a few minutes, because our next guest, Ellen Crosby, author of The French Paradox, is going to take us to Paris with Jacqueline Kennedy when she had her You're Abroad, and everything in the plot stems from that. I believe, what year was that? I'm going to have to go back and look. 19, well, here I can tell you, because I have that information right here. Just hang on.
49.
1949, her junior year abroad in Paris, which turned out to be very powerful. And I would like to say that Madame Vigée-Lebrun is an artist that I've always admired, who has worked into this plot. So if you're not done with things French, come back at 5:15 in how many minutes is that? 16. And we'll get to talk about that. Anyway, au revoir.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you, Patrick. Love you, Cara. See you soon.
Love you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Patrick. À tout à l'heure.
Oui, à tout à l'heure.
A bientôt.
Adios.